All right, what's up, guys? It's Gentry Todd. I'm sitting here with three of my favorite industry leaders in Charleston. Before we get rolling on all things Charleston, home, development, things of that nature, why don't we go around real quick, tell who you are, what you do, what your business is around town.
Yeah, well, I'm Jessie, and I own a design firm here in Charleston called JLV Creative.
Which is where we're at.
We do commercial and residential interior design.
Cool.
I'm Rick Rockwell, and I am a builder in Charleston. I specialize in restoring old houses in the downtown area. Occasionally I'll build a new one, but the name of my company is Rockwell Construction.
Awesome.
I'm Nicholas. I am an architect and now developer, and my company name is Architecture Development Office, to keep it generic. And I'm building and designing houses in the Park Circle area right now.
And you just did like an incredibly cool, unique one that we saw last week.
I did.
Yeah.
Glad you liked it.
Yeah, I loved it. Well, so along that idea, I mean, we're all seemingly in the home space, right? Sell them, design them, build them. What are some of the things that you guys are seeing industry-wide, maybe trend-wise? Is there something that you love and want to see more of moving forward, or is there something that you're kind of hoping gets left in 2018 in the rear view?
Well, I was thinking about this because you did give me a little heads up.
I'm sure you were.
So one of the things that I think has kind of already died, and I hope it just stays buried, like we've already had the funeral for it, we don't need to bring it back, is shabby chic. I'm over shabby chic for sure. That being said, you said, what do I like and want to see more of?
Yeah, right.
And I love character. And I feel like you guys especially are going to agree with this. Like, for people to not just do the same thing that their neighbor's doing, for them to inject a little bit of personality and to take some sort of risk, that's what I want to see more of. So whether it's doing a different cabinet color or choosing a flooring option that's like just really unique, or, something that they've salvaged, adding in some cool floating shelves, and just doing some things that add a little bit of character to a space versus just saying like, I want to be safe, I want to do white cabinets, white subway tile, and white countertops. That's fine.
Yep.
But you could do so much more.
Sure.
I just want to see more risk being taken in that regard.
Sure. Which, I mean, I'm sure you two see all the time, especially in some of the older builds you do, right, Rick?
Yeah, so the houses that I typically work on are in parts of the town where there's a large inventory of houses that haven't been lived in for decades.
Sure.
So finding the charm is uncovering and dismantling the house to an extent where you haven't lost the entire house, but you're trying to save some, and that's not always possible. But when you're looking for that charm that time gives you, there's a luck of the draw aspect of because every house is different. You can have a street of Charleston singles that were all built within a 10-year period, and they've all lived completely different lives from one another. So the ability to find historic fabric in a house is really a house-by-house basis. And I'm lucky enough, for the most part, to be working with people that like that journey of trying to find the elements that are within the house. That time, you can't fake time. I've tried. People ask me to make something look old that is not distressing or things of that nature. It never comes off as authentic to me. The elements that I find, whether it be beadboard or old beams that are within a house that have been preserved because people put layers and layers of cheap sheetrock over top of it, and we uncover it, it is a part of the discovery. It's not something that I can predict or create out of a vacuum. It's something that we find and we put together as a part of a larger program or a larger style. But I'm pretty malleable to what people find attractive in terms of cabinets or colors. I tend not to have a very strong opinion on those things because I find that those things to be reversible, and then unfortunately for me, I don't have a strong feeling about how that goes. I like to bring in people who have those feelings and are driving those conversations.
I have lots of those feelings.
Right.
Because I'm more concerned about the structure or the envelope or the character that I can find and contribute to her vision or the client's vision, or that collaboration that happens as a part of the project's energy. To me, it's fun, but I'm not myopic about those types of conversations or parts of the project.
Sure.
But But I like being able to show somebody who then comes in after I've rebuilt, when she or somebody like her comes into the project, I can say we saved these things, and then they'll incorporate that into what conversations come out from the client's perspective. But for me, it's luck of the draw oftentimes.
Yeah. And as somebody that's, I guess, a little bit newer to the scene, especially from a design perspective, do you find difficulty in designing certain spaces around some of the historic restrictions around town, or has it actually kind of been fun adding that element in? Because Charleston does have, I would say, a little bit of its own uniqueness in that we do have historical preservation at the forefront of so much of what we do downtown.
In terms of trends and things that I've worked well with my designs, right now, the black windows, the black on black, have really been kind of a strong component of what I've been doing
Sure.
with my houses. To Jesse's point, I like taking risks, but then it's such a challenge to figure out how to take a risk, but also have it remain timeless.
Yeah.
So with this latest house that I designed, I chose a Spanish tile for the backsplash of the kitchen, which is a 6-inch cobalt blue, so it makes a statement, but I feel like over time, it's not going to feel like something that somebody's going to say, oh, that was a 2018 tile choice. So I think there's a balance there in choosing something that makes a statement and is bold, but is also going to stand the test of time and not feel like it's such a dated element.
Yeah. And from design perspective, I think we've all trended, especially for older homes. I mean, I'm in and out of a lot of suburban areas that were developed back out in the 50s, 60s, 70s, so they were all compartmentalized. Now it's open concept. Does that last the test of time? Do you see more compartmentalization, or do you continue seeing everybody wanting sort of open concept moving forward?
My experience, I don't know about you guys, but people are all over open concept,
Sure.
which I think that it's a great look, and a lot of times it does allow you to get a lot of natural light into a space whenever you open things up.
Yep.
And it does certainly give flexibility, but I don't know that it's the right fit for every home. I think
Right.
that it really depends on lifestyle, the family itself, and then also just the fabric of the home.
Yep.
What would you say about that?
And also the use of the space.
Yeah.
Whether my architect is a classicist or modernist or something in between or off to the left, everybody's into open right now.
Yeah.
And I don't have a strong voice on that either, because I think it's easily reversible. If you construct something that allows you to span space,
Yes.
you have either steel beams or engineered lumber that allows you to open everything up. Then in the future, if somebody wanted to change that, they easily could.
Right.
So for me, it's about the reversibility of what I do in regards to the house's character. If I can preserve as much of the character of the original house as I can, then
Sure.
great. And if I do deviations or manipulations like open floor plans, a lot of the houses downtown, Charleston singles, Freedman's cottages, they're linear floor plans. It's room.
Yep.
And so when you open that up, and then you're defining the space by furniture or
Right.
lighting or anything like that, then you're creating a lot of flexibility, but everybody has to envision their furniture and their space and their kitchen and how all of that relates, and that's all in her court.
Yep.
And for me, I've just created a space that is malleable
Right.
and flexible.
You've set the canvas.
Yeah. And for me, that's all I see right now is open floor plans, and I think it's fine.
Sure.
I don't know how that's going to last. I don't know how that's going to age. I don't know what it's going to look like in 20 years.
Right.
To his point about something looking dated, that is a product of our architectural vocabulary right now, and it's a product of our time. And in 20 years, everybody's going to call it as such. And
Right.
but I don't know what that looks like in 20 years,
Right.
or how people feel about it in 20 years.
Well, and maybe that gets us to a sort of a bigger topic, which, right now, as you've seen over the test of time in Charleston, there's just been a lot of change.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, we're sitting in an area in Mount Pleasant that people used to consider the country.
Oh yeah.
So as we've sprawled out, we've had a lot of good things happen to the area in terms of just business coming in, a lot of great press, Condé Nast #1. How do you feel development has impacted on the whole? Do we need to, there's been measures recently that's tried to slow it down, but what are those impacts looking like? Where do you see in the next 5 to 10 year macro Charleston growing as a community?
Well, Nick and I have actually talked a little bit about this, and I've really enjoyed Nick's perspective because, as you know,
Yep.
I live downtown right now in an apartment that I've been renting for a while. I've been like a downtowner for life so far. But I am building in Park Circle.
Sure.
And Park Circle is an area in Charleston that I've always felt like it was sort of an
Appreciated?
underappreciated,
Yeah.
part of town because of the proximity to everything and just how cool it is. I mean, there's a lot of character in that area. There's like hills, which we don't really have in Charleston. I love a hill. And also there's so many cool established homes that have been there for a while, not nearly as old as some of the downtown homes.
Sure.
But there are some newer construction things popping up as well. And Nick's been building beautiful newer construction homes with open floor plans
Right.
up there. But you living there and working there, like, is that an area that you also agree is kind of underappreciated?
Absolutely. I mean, the benefit that Park Circle has versus, the fringe of Mount Pleasant, or if we go up north to Nexton or out to Johns Island, is that the neighborhood itself it was planned 100 years ago. There are houses that are, 60, 80 to 100 years old. So
Right.
you don't have this tabula rasa where you can just come in and do whatever you want. So there's going to be new with old, and anybody that comes in to build there is going to have to do infill development.
Sure.
With the exception of a couple projects that Mixon and the Beach Company have done.
Yep.
The rest of us just have to find, smaller individual lots and take it from there.
Right. For the mega developments though that have started to push all the way out, before it was just pushing on the fringe of Mount Pleasant, now pushing out to Awanda and in the opposite direction, way out into parts of West Ashton that were just widely considered rural until you get down almost to Savannah. Do you feel like that's impacting things like traffic? A big part of the reason people are going out that direction is affordability. Can you all, I guess, from your perspective, what are some of the things that you're seeing that is impacting your clients' decision making? As they go through these projects, I mean, is affordability the biggest problem we have? Is traffic the biggest problem we have that's driving a lot of these sort of home buying decisions?
And that kind of feathers into the previous question, which I love talking to people who've come here in
Yes.
the past 20 years. I'm local, born and raised, but then I left for 16 years. I left in the summer of '89, actually. So for me, coming back to Charleston in that 16-year period, I think was a pretty critical period to have left and then come back.
Yep.
Because it was a vastly different city when I came home. The other day when during the holiday week, when there were a lot of people weren't even in town, and I was riding around town, I felt like, oh, this is 1989.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I could get around town in 10
Right,
minutes.
right.
And because there was nobody on the streets.
Right.
Yeah,
Getting through the crosstown didn't take 15 minutes minimum.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So, and and my high school used to be downtown, and so I've been on those streets from my formative years up until my late 40s now, with a gap in between. So I've seen the architectural fabric remain constant,
Yep.
but the dynamics and the people and the businesses that are there radically different,
Sure.
Demographically and otherwise. So some of that I see as positive, and some of it I cannot afford most of the houses that I
Sure.
do downtown, which is why I live on James Island. That, and I like being away from my work a little bit. I like having a buffer between me.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be in the grocery store, and I will end up having conversations like this and for extended periods of time because I love talking about this. But it's
You need to unplug at some
you
point.
got to unplug, you got to go home, and now I have two little ones. So for me, my time management needs to be very well designed, and I need to get off the peninsula at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But for me, I've seen a lot of changes, and I do think there's a mix of good and bad with that. But I came back to Charleston intentionally to work on the peninsula, very specifically to work where I was trained and educated in and around Detroit, studying historic buildings. So for me, coming back to Charleston was a very intentional decision because I wanted to come to a market where my perspective was appreciated.
Sure.
And saving old buildings was not something I had to sell anybody on.
Yeah.
I found people in the
Ingrained
Midwest
in the culture.
Well, it is,
Yeah.
and it's nonpartisan. It's not controversial.
Right.
It's
accepted.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a part of the fabric, and it always was. So, for me, I think that there's a lot of good and bad that comes with it, but there's a lot of energy, and it allows me to do what I do without the financial constraints that would be a part of that project if it was off the peninsula.
Right.
You know, you take these houses that I work on and move them 2 miles to the east or the west, and the conversations are radically different.
Oh, sure.
So I feel like we're fortunate if we have found a niche in a certain part of this city that is a thriving city, that
Yep.
is a city that people want to come to for reasons that are hard to calculate. And this
Yep.
isn't Silicon Valley, or this isn't some
Right.
part of this country where there's a large industrial complex, though some of that's changing with Boeing and things. So there are some big draws here that weren't here when I grew up. But aside from that, there's a lot of people that just want to be here just because.
Yep.
And how do you quantify that?
Right.
So how do you predict that? But it's a perfect storm of beaches, restaurants. This was all woods when I was.
Right.
I can remember once you got a mile or two up in 17, there was nothing until the parts of Snee Farm that were there back
Right.
in the 80s. So it was kind of like an island by itself. But you're right. There's very little space between us and Georgetown now.
Right. Right.
And that's shocking to me. Mount Pleasant was a sleepy little town when I was a kid, but
now one of the fastest growing cities in the United States.
Yeah.
I think from my vantage point, the issue not only Mount Pleasant faces, but the area as a whole. And now I'm quoting statistics that are probably going to be wrong. But ballpark, the Chamber of Commerce came out and said from 2010 to roughly 2016, 2017, housing pricing has increased roughly 40+%. And during that time, wages have increased in the area about 12.
Wow.
So that delta,
Yep.
is impacting a lot of decisions, especially when being made housing-wise, which is why I think, when I first started selling property, John's Island was like, you want 5 acres and to be left alone.
yeah.
Let's go. Now because you can get land at a cheaper cost out there, you're starting to see not just one development, but several, take off because the price points are just affordable. So, how do we combat? I don't know what that answer is. I'm trying to figure it out within the context of my industry, but how do we figure out the sort of affordability problem, I guess, that we've created here because we've had such buzz. We've got people retiring here. We've got people here now moving for work thanks to big manufacturers like Boeing and Volvo and Mercedes. But all that's going up 26,
Right.
and we're still confined, around the peninsula, around these communities not too far off, where we don't have certainly the infrastructure to control traffic, where we don't have these mega high-rise buildings to house tons and tons of people. So have you guys seen, heard, sort of thought on your own, what do we do to sort of solve that affordability issue?
It is a tough question. I think in general, people will continue to go out because in terms of development, that's a low-hanging fruit,
Yep.
right? The land is less expensive. We have cars. We can just drive out there. I think from a long-term planning perspective, we should probably take on a little bit of the Portland model where they put an urban growth boundary. What that would do is, set a limit as to where we can keep expanding. And then within that, it really raises the level of density within, that. It raises the level of your quality of schools, but it also forces everybody to really take a look at infrastructure.
Right.
One thing they demanded in the early 80s in Portland is that every single bridge that connects a lot of the neighborhoods to the downtown had pedestrian and bike access, right? So that was something the citizens did, which we're trying to do with the West Ashley connection.
I was going to say, they keep going back and forth on that West Ashley.
It's an age-old,
Yeah,
fight, right?
right.
It's something that a lot of cities, deal with, but it's one that needs to happen, right? Because we have to have better connections within our own neighborhoods, but then also to, where jobs are. So that would be kind of one strategy that I would look at. Last thing that I'll touch on with that is that density is not a scary word for me.
Yeah.
It is for a lot of people here, and being a transplant coming from New York.
Coming from New York, 400 square feet is like, this is huge.
Right, but I think people look at it as it creates problems, but I think it also solves a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And what I was alluding to earlier is when you start creating other than downtown, right? We all agree that it's historic and that we're not going to touch a lot of the buildings there. But if you're looking at West Ashley, Mount Pleasant, Park Circle, let's make these as dense as possible so that we're not actually going out into this untouched land out in Johns Island or
Right.
out toward Awendaw. Let's leave that. Let's increase the density. And we all know that millennials are less likely to buy because they're more likely to want to live next to where they work, or they want to, walk to where they, go to
Right.
happy hour, things like that. So
Which in a weird way too, boomers are starting to replicate a lot of the same
That's true.
behaviors, right? Because
That's
they're
true.
downsizing from the McMansion and moving back towards
It's a great
walkability
point, right?
and amenities, right?
they want to live next to where they can have 10 options for dinner.
Right.
So I think we have to start looking at more dense options, right? And that starts with planning. We have to talk to our city planners and allow for more density. And then the affordability question is allow developers greater density. It's something they do in San Francisco, it's something they do in New York, it's just part of their culture. So you allow for greater density as long as you incorporate 20 to 30% affordability within that. So then
Sure.
you start to blend affordable and market rate housing together, and it creates better communities and it creates more walkable
Right.
lifestyle.
Right. In terms of density, thoughts, especially as it, as I guess truly the only Charlestonian that's seen sort of this build up, do you have any problem with creating more density around town?
No, I think it's a good thing, but that is a part of a much bigger picture about
Yeah.
what kind of community we want to build and live in, and there are a lot of individual decisions that people have to get their head around if they're not young and want to be where the energy is, or older and are downsizing. Those are some pretty predictable trends, but then there's a lot of us that are in between that have to make decisions based on whether or not we have kids, or
Right.
what the schools are like, and those are tough decisions to
Sure.
navigate in Charleston, anywhere in the country, I suppose. But when I grew up, moving out to the suburbs was the ideal, right? And Burns Downs was Charleston's first subdivision off the peninsula, right? So those neighborhoods, and I went to Blessed Sacrament right there on Savannah Highway all through grade school. So when I was a kid and the basketball went into Highway 17, we'd go out and get the ball.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Like that.
Not anymore.
That was a thing.
Yeah.
And that fence wasn't there. But for me, I think that seeing Charleston's growth and the return to the city, where I always wanted to be downtown. When I was a teenager, that's where we wanted to be. That's where the energy and the vibes were, that as a young person, where you wanted to be. And I don't think that needs to be a young person's perspective. That
Sure.
that can be all of us as we get older. I find oftentimes that I just put myself in the best proximity to the positive trend that I can. So if somebody wants to talk to me about building something out, and I decline. My projects, you could draw a circle that's that has a 3-mile diameter, and you will hit every project that I have right now.
Yeah.
And that's by design. I've tried to do projects all over Kingdom Come when I first started,
Yeah.
and it was a challenge because I didn't have the ability to make quick decisions and get on
Right.
the job site quickly. And being a small company now, I don't have tons of staff.
Yeah.
I have a small team, and we make things happen together collectively. But I can get to any job within a matter of a couple of minutes, because
So-
they're all right around the crosstown.
I'm admittedly sort of going through the same thing right now in terms of decision making on, is it, as a small, hyper niche local business, a good decision
Right.
to be segmented?
I wrestle with that.
I think before, especially like our parents' generation, it was like bigger's better, more.
Yeah.
And now have we pivoted back where it's like, well, actually, it is really good to be an expert in one area, or it is really good to serve one specific niche. Hey, it's great that I am the architect that knows Park Circle area the best, or like I know historical Reno downtown better than anyone. So you're going to fall into my lap.
Right.
Because I'm viewed as the expert. Is that the way, I guess, local business, that's the way your business is trending? Because that's something I wrestle with all the time.
Me too. I mean, I had a friend of mine this morning reach out to me and ask me when I'm going to do another project in the West Side.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have an answer for him, because now I'm in the East Side. And, so you can kind of find yourself in these little niches almost by accident,
Right.
because the opportunities are in Park Circle or North Central,
Right.
Or Wagner Terrace, or, the different parts of the city that go in and out of vogue for various reasons and have, you know, their moment in the sun where people want to be in that part of the city. And then it goes beyond it. I'm figuring it out, and it's a challenge. But I'm all over the peninsula, but I'm just, when I get to talk to somebody who's doing something in Park Circle, I get excited because I want to hear about what's happening there, because I kind of wish I had one going there. But, you know, it's hard to once life sort of takes you in a certain path and projects or opportunities present themselves, you pursue them. If you feel that it's worthy.
We're sort of the complete polar opposite of what you just said.
You're like,
You're
no,
everywhere.
shut
We're
up.
everywhere. No, we really are. But to that point, I think that it certainly produces a lot of really awesome aspects in terms of, you know, it's very exciting for a creative person to be able to have different types of projects, not only all over Charleston, but all over the East Coast.
Sure.
So it's very stimulating and exciting, and it gives us new opportunities to play with different materials, because if you're in a coastal place versus somewhere in the mountains, there's just different things that you're doing,
Right.
Especially with like the style of the homes or the office spaces. You know, so we do both residential and commercial. So already we're doing more than just one little niche. Then you take the fact that there's 6 of us, and so, you know, as a small business owner, I've had to put on a hat that was different than when it was just me or just me and one person. Sure. Now I've had to learn, and I'm still learning, to be an effective leader and support system, because it's not okay for me to just be doing a good job with design and keeping the business afloat. My main role is to be a support system for my team, and to make sure that they have the resources to do the same things to produce really great work. But there's this whole travel component to it, and you know, we are growing, which is super exciting, and I love it. The idea of segmenting sounds great. I mean, it sounds like a work smarter, not harder, but at the same time, I have certain goals, and those goals are affiliated with growth. So I can't dominate the world unless I'm working in multiple places, you know? So I am trying to figure out how to do some cloning of different like team members and myself. But other than that, it's been
But
good.
would you say that predominantly your work exists, like if you looked as a whole, what percentage of your work, because we're in Mount Pleasant, is based within 5 to 6 mile radius?
So in the Charleston area, we currently have a few projects in Mount Pleasant, and like Daniel Island is really big for us right now. We've got Kiowa, Johns Island. We're literally all over Charleston, even into Somerville.
So really, truly the polar opposite of what I was.
But it's a really interesting idea, and this is one reason that. So I'm not from Charleston, but I've lived here for 20 years, and I've seen significant shifts, not in just the traffic and the change of the landscape with where people are moving, but also the type of person that's coming here and staying here. And so I've been really excited. I was just having this conversation with another entrepreneur the other day about how there's so many people that have these wonderful ideas that instead of what I used to see, which was them leaving and going to California and New York and elsewhere to pursue their dreams and pursue their careers, they're saying, you know what, I really love Charleston. I love the quality of life that I have here. I'm going to invest in my community and build my career here. I'm seeing it a lot with females as well, which gets me super excited.
I was going to say, I picked up a client the other day, worked for one of the big financials up in New York. After 8 years of doing that rat race, hey, you can live wherever you want. Where do you want to set up your life? You just got to come back once a quarter. And I think we're getting more and more people just like that sort of fulfill that demo of, hey, I can have the work-life balance I truly want. You know, like I don't have to live in a 400 square foot shoebox of a place in Manhattan in a 40-story high-rise, you know, and like go to work in the cold or take the subway. I can live near the beach, you know, I can telecommute in. So I think that may be a huge draw for us sort of moving forward, and possibly why you're doing world domination, because you've created all these connections all over.
Well, you just moved down from New York recently, so you've probably experienced some of what Gentry was just talking about.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, you know, the broader discussion that we've been, you know, wrestling with is that I don't see this trend slowing down.
No. I mean, by 2030, 1 million people projected to be here.
That's right.
Yeah.
So for the next, I think till 2040, we're the Carolina corridor region is predicted to have the most growth of any along the East Coast.
Yep.
So we need to address some of the issues that we were talking about earlier in terms of density, in terms of infrastructure. Whether we like it or not, the people that have grown up here, like, this is the reality.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's moving toward that, and the economics and the desirability of lifestyle is just not really going to change. In terms of like business size and region, I would completely agree with everything that's been said. It totally depends on your business model.
Totally, yeah.
For me, it's best for me because being a developer now, it's like there's a political component, and you can't know everybody within every
Town council.
Right.
Right.
So once you get your connections within especially being a small developer, that's kind of your bread and butter.
Sure.
Right?
Tough to clone that from community to community.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas you're looking for clients that can fit with your taste and your budgets, and you need to be kind of everywhere, right?
And they need us to be everywhere because
That's
somebody
right.
that's building here might also have a lake house, or
Sure.
there's
Sure.
just different
Absolutely. It's
needs.
more exposure for you. The better your exposure is, the more clients you're going to have. So it's a win-win for you just to be everywhere.
I would also say that this has always been Charleston, though. Charleston is a port town that has always been growing, has always had
Yep.
development pressures, though they probably called it other things. Where, but it has always been the case. Ansonboro was the first neighborhood to be built out of the center of the major part of the city, and that that was a part of getting away from the smells of cattle and other animals being slaughtered and salted and loaded onto ships. I mean, people were always moving away from the heart of what was a city in the 18th and 19th century. So this is not new. This is a part. Nathaniel Russell it was from Rhode Island. And he has a house museum in downtown on Meeting Street. So,
Right.
but that's always been the case. So for any of the purists, old Charlestonians who want to talk about how horrible it is, that conversation, how horrible it is, has been a part of the Charleston narrative as well.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Whether it was 1850 or 1900 or 1950 or today.
I just always joke their net worth is probably like going up 4x. So can you really complain?
It's a port town, and
Yeah,
it is always that's where, and it has a lot of unique qualities to it. The islands and the parts of the city that make it unique are part of its character, its DNA, and these conversations in different forms have always been a part of
Totally.
Charleston's history.
If I found you on a Saturday, perfect weather, where are you in town?
You guys start.
Either kayaking near Shem Creek or somewhere on Sullivan's, eating and going to the beach.
Yeah.
I'm with my wife and boys, and we're planning
At
something.
dinner.
Yeah. Oh well, that's Friday night.
I'm sorry.
That's Friday night. We have a family dinner every Friday night. But on Saturday, it's now in this part of my life, having children, we are looking at where families can have activities. Whereas before it was just the beach.
Right.
It was just outdoor activities. Now it's the children's museum
Right.
or things of that nature. So yeah,
Children's Museum is actually really cool.
it is. It's quite
Yeah.
Even for adults.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Right on.
So this is not going to be the popular answer, but
There's no wrong answer.
well,
Where
okay,
are you?
all right. I feel like I've struggled a bit with the work-life balance thing, which I think I've told you before.
No.
And so a lot of times on Saturday, it's like my first chance to be like really at home and to not have somewhere that I like have to be at a certain time for work stuff. So sometimes it's just I sleep in, I open my door to my porch and let like the nice breeze come in, and I just kind of putz around the house a little
How late
bit.
do you sleep in? Because I think I texted you at like 8:30, seemingly thinking like, oh, everybody's awake now.
Sure. It's a
Yeah.
nice
She was
day.
like, this was not sleeping in, you moron. Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I already got stuff done. Yeah.
No, I feel like 9:30, like that's a sleep in. That's like a weekend luxury sleep in, right?
Ish, yeah.
Anyway, so but then I'll go to the gym. I like clean. That's when I like deep clean. I do all the like kind of lame stuff, but it feels so good. I can like light my candles, open my little door to my porch. Let
See,
the
this
breeze
was
come
supposed to
in.
be like a shameless plug for just like how much you love Charleston, but you know.
Yeah, no, I love
being a
my
homebody,
downtime. Yeah. But I do go
You
to
could
the
be
gym.
anywhere. Yeah.
Go to the gym. I come here a lot of times on Saturdays, but
Mm.
you know, I think Sundays when I get to like maybe I'll go explore, and I'm spoiled because I live here, so I get this
True.
all the time.
True. And being in business for yourself, it's like you just take your time when you can get it. So
Yeah.
this Saturday setup was probably a bad one. I still contend western part of Sullivan's Island, sunset summertime with some form of takeout. It's the best setup. You get the sunset like right over the water in the city. There's very few people around.
Well, not now. Now everyone's
Well, the
getting it.
7 people that watch this are going to be there, but
Station 16.
yeah,
somewhere down
ish.
there.
Yep. Take the dog down, watch the sunset, and then once the mosquitoes come out, once the wind dies, that's when you get off.
Yep.
I love playing bocce ball in that area, especially if it's low tide, because
Oh,
there's an
yeah.
enormous expanse of beach there.
Totally.
You've got the harbor, the city in the background. It's gorgeous.
Well, maybe I will go there. I mean, that does sound fun.
I mean
would,
that
not
that
do
was
on
like
a
what
Saturday.
made me fall in. Yeah, but then quickly realized like I'm never affording Sullivan's Island, so I'll just come over the bridge and visit, and that all day. I think the last question I had was from a buddy when I threw this shamelessly up on Instagram yesterday. He had a very specific question, of which I thought especially you two gentlemen might be able to help with. Container building in Charleston. He's frustrated that he can't do it.
I'm not going to be much help for him.
Yeah.
The dimensions, I've studied it, I've looked at it. It's not that you can't do it. There's so many limitations to building with containers that just don't really allow it to be as flexible as people want it to be. I think the interior dimensions are like 8 by 8.
Yeah.
So from a ceiling height perspective and
Yep.
from a width, now you're cutting out 2 to sandwich them together, because 8 feet wide is really just not like I mean, you might find some places downtown that are 8 feet wide.
Yeah,
but
right.
If you're building new construction, that's not really a typical comfortable dimension to live in, and there's no insulation, there's no systems.
Right.
So I'm going to be a Debbie Downer on this one.
You mean
you're
it's
really-
not as easy as that Facebook article that they saw?
And most of the time when you see these done, they are pop-up stores for
Right.
Adidas or Freitag, or
Totally.
and it's like we can put some glass in one end,
Right.
and
Yeah.
we can somehow put like a makeshift HVAC unit in, and it's like you can make it work for stuff like that. If you really have a desire to do it, I'm not saying you can't, but
Yeah.
you're going to have somebody that's going to work with you and get really creative.
Yep.
You're not going to want typical interior finishes, and you're going to have some maybe funky moments. But
Yep.
I say go for it, but understand that they're not designed to be lived in.
Right.
So you're going to have to get really creative.
Right.
I will say I kind of don't understand why we haven't seen some sort of tiny house movement in a stronger sense. Like I've seen like a couple
some.
pop up. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's like very few and far between.
Yeah.
And even when you go to Greenville, we were just there doing some installations like a week ago, and there's an actual tiny house community. And it's really cool. And as somebody who's interested in the design aspect, I would love to get my hands on some tiny houses, because I think it's a huge challenge to incorporate all the functionality
yeah.
and also make it look really clean
Right.
and awesome. So that would be really fun. I'd like to see more of
Are most
that
of those
here.
permanent structures, or are they mobile?
I think they're mostly mobile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I think we had a tiny house episode here.
I think we did.
Because
I've seen like 2 though. I mean, I haven't really seen a lot.
I know. Yeah,
And this seems like a place for it, but
Yeah, I had a friend of mine on that episode, and but we have an inventory of small homes that I think almost qualify, called
Right.
premium cottages.
Right.
They are in their original construction between 500 and 700 square feet.
Yeah.
Right.
And families were much larger back then, and
they're just
and-
going for a pretty penny is the
well,
difference.
yeah. I concur with a lot of what he said about the
Yeah.
problems and the challenges around
Yeah.
the container. I looked at it.
Well, because you can seemingly get the structure for so cheap,
Well,
but
but-
then it's the manipulation thereof.
But
that-
it's nothing, because
Yeah.
you have to cut in windows, cut in
Totally.
doors, you have to
Yep.
insulate it, you have
Right.
to. And so then what's left
Yeah.
from the container
Yeah,
aspect
yeah.
that's original and then truly usable. I converted some barns into residential structures in the Midwest, or other uses, and you were always trying to morph modernity, just like I do with the historic houses. Historic houses probably lived just fine until air conditioning, and now the challenges of creating an internal space that's climatized and efficient that never was meant to be is a challenge enough. Let alone going from something that has a completely different original use to being lived in. It's too hard. I have a friend who made an art studio with one, but
cool.
but not to be lived in, and not to be even worked in the summertime.
Right.
Tell your friend to contact me. I mean, if he's got the time and money, I mean,
We'd love to see it.
we can do it. It's just it'll takes a lot of planning and
Sure.
Sure. It's a creative endeavor that's not one that's just let's pull it off the shelf and
It's out
To
of the
be
box.
totally frank,
Pun
yeah.
intended.
To be totally frank, I wasn't even sure if you were allowed to do container building. In certain
There
pockets of
are
Charleston.
issues, and ultimately you have to end up getting an engineer to stamp it.
Yeah, right.
And that's
Right.
the challenge is
Right.
whether or not they will.
Right.
And I have friends who are engineers who are reluctant, so I wasn't able to kind of.
Sure.
And that goes to the tiny house too, because I've looked at that in Park Circle. The zoning that is in place in many places doesn't really afford the density that you would want to make it kind of economically feasible. So you run into everything kind of starts at zoning and planning.
Yeah, right.
And so every issue that we deal with is political and is kind of driven by kind of larger planning issues. So
Which, decade ago is probably a little bit easier to grease that wheel than it is today.
potentially, I won't touch that.
Yeah, right. Well, anything else you guys want to plug before we wrap up? Any questions you have you want to touch on?
No.
No?
I
Good?
don't know. I
This
think
has
we
been
kind of
great.
killed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming out. It was truly a pleasure to at least speak with a few other industry experts. And hopefully we'll continue doing work around town for the
Yeah.
foreseeable future.
Well, thank you. Thanks for putting this together.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah,
nice.
of course.
Yeah, enjoyed it.
It's always great to talk about this with industry experts.
Yeah. Well, experts. Yeah, right. All right. Well, thank you.